Okay, today is the 6th of March, 2010. I am interviewing Walter Chop, who was born on November 10th, 1924. The two people who are at this interview are Robert Mastroni, who is doing the interview, and Walter Chop, who I'm interviewing. Walter Chop was in World War II. He was in what was then called the Army Air Corps. His, his rank was a corporal, and he served in England, France, and Italy. So we're ready to begin the interview. Were you drafted, Walter, or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Tell us how that came about.
Well, I tried to enlist in the Marines, and they refused because of my poor vision. And then I tried to enlist in the Navy, and they refused because of my poor vision. And several months later, I was drafted, and that was it.
And where were you living at the time?
In Bridgeport, Connecticut.
What was the address at the time?
I lived at 413 East Main Street in Bridgeport.
And so why did you join?
I tried to join
Why did you try to join?
because I wanted to get in the service. I was anxious to do my part in the war effort, and I was anxious. So right after graduating high school, I tried to join both the Navy and the Air Force, the Navy and the Marines, but they wouldn't accept me because of my poor vision. And finally, several months after that, I was drafted, and they had taken me in the Air Force.
Can you recall your first days in the service, what it was like?
Oh, yes, I enjoyed it. My basic training I did in Miami Beach, Florida, and it was like a vacation. We lived in hotels. We did our exercises and marching on the beach in Miami Beach, and it was just wonderful. We were eating in the best hotels and served as though we were guests, and it was just great. And we had very little additional duty outside of our basic training, and we enjoyed it very, very much. It was like a wonderful vacation.
Do you remember any of the instructors that you had?
No. No, that was over 60 years ago.
Any experiences in boot camp that stand out in your mind?
No. Well, we were living in a hotel, and it wasn't like living in a camp and eating in restaurants and sleeping in beautiful places. 2 men to a room. We had our own showers. It was just great. Absolutely great.
So you, all in all, good experience.
Yes, like a vacation.
Now, you served in World War II, and tell us exactly, chronologically, where did you go during the course of your time in the service?
Well, from basic training, we went through a number of different tests to see what we were qualified for the most. And apparently, they put me into parachute school, and I learned how to pack parachutes. We were transferred. I went to a place in Illinois, and that's where they taught us how to pack parachutes. And that's what my job was. Eventually, from there, they transferred me to a squadron, the 439th Troop Carrier Group, 93rd Squadron, and I was one of the parachute riggers. There were a number of
Could you
them.
explain a little bit more detail? What's a parachute rigger? What do you mean by packing the chute?
Chutes had to be packed and repacked every 60 days. So we knew they weren't damp or anything like that. So we would unpack a packed parachute, unpack it, and refold it and put it back in its case. Each person in the Air Force who we worked with had to be fitted separately. And since I had background as a tailor in civilian life, I was the one who did it the best. And I was doing most of the officers' fit
Fitted for what?
for the parachute. Each parachute fits according to your size, and we had to fit them. They had to try the parachute on, and we would tighten it up and stitch it so it would fit that person, and only that person could use that parachute. If you were big, it was one way. It was if you were small. I'm very small. I was 5'6", and I was fitting up people who were 6'6". So you could see the difference in sizes, and it made a big difference in fitting them. So I was fitting them since I had a lot of experience in civilian life as a tailor.
So part of it was sewing
We did a lot of sewing too, yeah. And if there was anything, as we were packing the parachutes, if we saw any type of tear or anything, I would sew it up and stitch it. We had sewing machines. And it was a very interesting kind of work.
So did you end up in this because of your tailor background?
Yes. I don't know why they would have put me in there otherwise.
Like you weren't in actual combat,
No.
correct?
I saw no combat at all.
Were there any casualties in your unit that you worked for? Or
No.
were they all?
No. We used to fly the paratroopers. The troop carriers carried paratroopers. Like when we started in England, we used to fly them into France, and they would jump, and our airplanes would come back to England.
You weren't on the airplane when they jumped.
No.
You would be back in England.
Right.
Did you ever jump out of the plane?
No, no. We were not allowed to jump.
Okay. So you packed uniforms for those who then subsequently jumped, like
Yes.
were they, for example, individuals who jumped in D-Day at Normandy? Did you pack the chutes for those people?
We didn't pack them for the soldiers. The soldiers packed their own who jumped. They packed their own chutes. We packed them for our Air Force personnel who was flying them over. So in the event they had to jump from the airplane, they'd have their own parachute. It was only our people. The paratroopers were from different units, and we were just flying them over.
So paratroopers packed their own
Yes,
parachute.
yes. We packed them for our Air Force flying personnel from our unit.
Okay. Did you any experiences in the service during the time that you were? You said you went to England.
Yeah.
And to France.
Yeah.
Now explain how that happened. You first went to England.
First went to England, and after the United States and our allies took over France, then we moved into France. We went to an airport in France, and we were stationed in France.
So that would have been after 44 then?
Yes, yes. I don't remember the exact time the Allies took over France, but that's when we moved into France.
Do you remember where you were stationed?
No, not in France. No, I don't remember.
Did you ever get liberties in France?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.